Hello everyone, welcome back to Young and Wifed Up. This is Gabie. Thank you for joining me today for another episode. Unfortunately, I'm going to be alone today. Marcella has had some family things come up that she needs to take care of, and so she will be absent from this month's episodes. However, I'm very excited to announce that next week I'm going to be bringing my mom in on the podcast. Marcella and I have been wanting to have another interview with her in a new season. We haven't interviewed her or talked with her on the podcast since season 2, I believe. So that'll be really fun. We have a good topic that we're going to discuss that she's definitely a pro at, and we are going to discuss it in 2 different parts. So it'll be an extended episode that'll be over 2 weeks, and I'm really excited to bring her on the podcast and chat with her and just have some quality time with her, because her and I always have a good time when we chat. And it's a great way for us to catch up too, because my family all lives in Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, that's where I've been up to this month. The past month, February, was kind of a rough one for my husband and I. We were both very sick with some sort of virus or flu for about 2 weeks. It was very rough, very hard. And then in the middle of all that, my husband had a medical emergency, and that really added to the stress of our day. And we're finally coming out of it. And right after we were recovering, and my husband wasn't even fully recovered from his virus or flu, I ended up going to Tennessee and to go visit my family. And I was there for a week, and it was a very awesome time. It was very refreshing and nice to see all of my family members and love on the kids, love on my nephews, and I really miss everybody already. But I'm happy to be back with my honey back in Nevada, and I'm excited to get back to homemaking and stuff. We have a lot of stuff going on this month with hosting other family members. My in-laws are coming in a couple days, and my brother's also coming to visit me, so I'm really excited to get just a lot of time with family this month, and excited for springtime and excited for warmer weather, sunshine. I'm sure a lot of us are. But that's basically the catch up that I have for you guys, and I have a fun episode for you guys. But before we get into that, I'm just going to do some housekeeping. If you're not already, join our Facebook group. It's called Young and Wifed Up. You can easily find it, and we have awesome discussions about the podcast episode. I give all the announcements there first, and we also do polls. We encourage engagement with all of our members. We want you guys to discuss things, and we have fun discussions in there. We also are discussing a new book club that I'm teasing right now. I need to do another poll in the Facebook group, because we won the poll with fiction. It was fiction versus nonfiction, and fiction won. So now I'm going to come up with another poll to kind of narrow down the book that we're going to be reading together. I'm very excited about that. We're definitely due for a new book club sometime soon. And then also, if you didn't know already, a very small minority of our audience watches us on YouTube. So if you didn't know, we do have a YouTube channel, Young and Wifed Up, and you can listen and watch all of our podcast episodes from the last, I believe, 4 seasons. We've been recording them and posting them on YouTube. I honestly don't do enough to market our YouTube channel, mostly because the majority of our audience listens on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And thank you so much, those of you that do. But I wanted to let you guys know, if you're interested in watching our podcast episodes, or if you guys have friends that aren't really into listening to podcasts, but they do watch YouTube, this is a good alternative for them. All of the episodes are there for you guys already. Okay, and lastly, if you're not a Patreon subscriber and you would like to be, the past couple of weeks, Marcella and I have put a lot of exclusive content out, including I did did a bonus episode talking about gray hair and aging and my thoughts about that, a personal decision that I've made regarding the subject. And it was a really fun discussion and actually sparked a lot of conversations with our Patreon listeners. And it's been really fruitful. And I'm really thankful that I put myself out there because I was a little nervous to talk about the subject because sometimes that subject can be kind of controversial. And then I also posted recently a blog post talking about 5 courageous women that are Christian women that have tons of virtue, women that I guarantee at least 1 or 2 of them you've never heard of before. So if you are interested in reading that blog post, I do short biographies on all of them. And even just rereading it again today, I just am re-inspired by these women's stories. And it's really worth meditating on and thinking about, especially since the world is celebrating Women's Month. Definitely a time for us to meditate and think about what women we truly want to be and what women we want to imitate. And then also, very close in subject to my episode today, Marcella last month put out an episode called Meal Plan with Marcella, and she gives tons and tons of tips about meal planning if you're in a meal planning rut. We've had a few different episodes where we discuss some meal planning strategies, but I think she just goes into so much depth and detail. So if you're in a space where you're just kind of struggling with your meal plan or don't even know where to start, or if you have been a meal planner and you just kind of feel like you're in a rut and you need a fresh start, this is the episode for you. I listened to it and I was very encouraged by a lot of the tips that she has, and I'm going to implement them myself. So head over to Patreon to get all those exclusive contents and so much more. And I hope you guys that are Patreon subscribers have been enjoying it. And I really appreciate all of you who comment and like and engage in any way, shape, or form of our podcast. Rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. We cannot do this without you guys. And if you would like to keep this podcast going, it does take time, energy, and money for us to do it. So if you are interested in supporting us financially, Patreon is the way to go. There's 3 different tiers with 3 different sets of exclusive content that you can get. And you can subscribe for a month. You can subscribe for a year. You can commit to subscribe to us long term. Whatever is in the budget for you guys, we appreciate every single cent. It is such a blessing to us for us to be able to continue to dedicate some time to making content for you guys, to encourage you guys in the faith and to spur one another on as we take care of our households. So I'm ready for my subject now. It is kind of exhausting doing a main episode without somebody to kind of take the load of the episode off of you too. I think Marcella and I just have such a natural rhythm with each other that we can kind of share the workload. But today it's going to be all on me. So please forgive me if I'm just not on my game, because usually our podcast is discussion and conversation based. And today's is just going to be me talking to you guys, hanging out with you guys, and talking to you about how you can level up your skills in the kitchen. So let's get into it. So as I was preparing for this month's episode, I was trying to think about different topics that I want to discuss. I knew that I was going to be asking my mom to join me, and I knew exactly what subject I wanted her to tackle because I've been telling her and telling other people for a long time, I really want her to talk about this. But as far as my episode by myself, I was like, what am I going to do? So my husband and I were talking about it, and I was asking him for some ideas, and he said that I should talk about the different ways that we can become more comfortable in the kitchen. And he even said to me, it can be secretly also for him, because he is somebody who's extremely uncomfortable in the kitchen, and he has gotten a lot better over the years, especially since he has had to step into the kitchen a lot more than maybe more traditional households like ours would have to, especially because I have chronic illnesses. And there are many times during the month where I am just out of commission and I need his help. and he is very happy to step in and help. And so I try the best I can to kind of manage my expectations for the different things that he can cook. And a lot of that has to do with him just not being as comfortable. He's not constantly in the kitchen like I am. It's more natural for me. I'm very comfortable in the kitchen. I just don't even really think about it. I just do it. And I know that for people like him, and also just for many wives too, and people that are becoming engaged and they want to be proficient in the kitchen, they can really struggle with being comfortable in the kitchen and even embarrassed and say things like, oh, I'm just like a bad cook, or I just really struggle. So I just kind of want to offer some like basic level tips, and then also more like pro tips or tips for people that are already comfortable in the kitchen that maybe you haven't thought about. But this isn't just for the wife. It could be for anybody who spends a lot of time in the kitchen, or things that you want to teach your children to be comfortable in the kitchen. But our podcast is primarily homemakers and wives that listen to our podcast. So I'm going to be mainly talking to you. So if you have time to spend in the kitchen and you'd like to up your game, I have some tips for you. So what are my qualifications? I am not a trained chef by any means, like at all. Zero training. All of my training, like official training, is my grandmother, and sorry mom, not really my mom. My mom is the first to admit that she did not spend a whole lot of time in the kitchen. It's not something that she really enjoyed as much as other areas of being a mom and a wife. So we're going to give her some grace. She has over the years become way more proficient in the kitchen, and she does make some really good lasagna and chicken soup and other like hits that all of us get excited about. But the person that I saw the most cooking like a full-on meal a lot was my grandma. Every time we were at her house for any amount of time, she spent most of her time in the kitchen. And so I was very influenced by her. Most of the meals that she cooked were Latin cuisine because she's Mexican. I'm Mexican, half Mexican. So as a full-time homemaker, I spent a ridiculous amount of time in the kitchen. So that's part of my qualifications, is I spend most of my time in the kitchen, especially now. I have been the primary cook in our family for going on 6 years of marriage. So that's a lot of time that I've spent most of my days in the kitchen. Even when I was working a lot of hours, I was the primary cook. And even though Ryan does step in from time to time to help me, I'm still considered the cook in our family. And like I said before, I'm also half Mexican, so I'm a certified Latina. So I think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to cooking. I honestly wish that my sister was with me in this discussion, because she also is a certified Latina, but she's also a rock star in the kitchen. She's so great, and she's been a wife longer than I have. Maybe she can give her 2 cents later in a bonus episode, but for now, you're just going to get my tips, all right? So let's get to it. The first tip that I have in a broader sense is to become very organized as possible in the kitchen. So these are the different subheadings I have. So the first thing is to meal plan. Everybody says to meal plan, but nobody knows where to start, and it's very overwhelming. There's so many different ways to meal plan. There's the meal preppers who prep their meals, like their breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all in one day. And I am not that person. Absolutely not. Like, I have done that a couple times where I like prepped all of our meals in one day or a couple days, and I just don't love leftovers that much. I talked about that in our last episode. It's a struggle for me. So for me to eat the same thing every single day for a week would actually be like traumatizing. If I had to, and I have had to, when I lived in Los Angeles and I was on food stamps, and I like absolutely had to have a very like limited amount of choices. I had to eat a lot of the same thing all the time. But now that we are able to have more variety in our meal plan, I prefer not to eat things for more than 2 or 3 days. So I kind of factor that in. The only thing that I do meal plan is snack boxes. And this is a newer thing. My husband mentioned it when we interviewed them last month. But what I do is I buy I buy ingredients to make essentially like a Starbucks protein box. I have raw cheese. I have beef sticks or hard-boiled eggs. I do hummus sometimes. I do veggies sometimes. And then I do some fruit, or I have a little space for crackers and stuff like that. And I do prep that. That's the only thing that I prep at the beginning of the week after I go shopping. So, and I'm okay with doing that because usually if I'm snacking, I'm not like completely against eating that every single day, because usually the same snacks I have every day. So now it's just like in a little box all ready for me to go. When you're strapped for a quick meal, or you're in the grocery store and you don't have a plan and you're like, man, I didn't have time to meal plan. Again, listen to Marcel's Patreon exclusive bonus episode. It is so detailed, so helpful. We also have a couple other episodes where we mention meal planning. So if you chuck the word meal plan in your search engine where our podcast is, you should be able to find the episodes that we discuss different meal planning strategies. But if you are strapped for a quick meal, or you're in a grocery store and you're like, I didn't meal plan, I'm struggling, what do I do? This is a quick meal to consider. Always consider a protein, a carb, fiber, and fat. And sometimes they can kind of go with each other. Like, for example, like an apple has fiber and it's a carb. So that sort of thing. You can kind of make dual, what am I saying? See, it's already happening. I'm already losing track of myself. This is what happens when I don't have a co-host, okay? Anyway, scratch that. When you are shopping, so let me give you a couple examples. And this has happened to me on the weeks where they were a little bit more frantic, or say we had unexpected guests. That has happened to us before, where we had unexpected guests. I didn't have a meal prepared for that night, and I just rushed to the store and was like, okay, protein, I can get a rotisserie chicken and I'm ready to go. Carb, I have a loaf of sourdough bread that's been proofing in my, fridge. I can get that together, or I can pick up a loaf from the store really quick. Fiber, I can find a veggie, I can do Brussels sprouts, and I can even do bacon with my Brussels sprouts for more protein and fat. And you could cook that in butter. Nice and crispy Brussels sprouts with butter and bacon and chicken and bread, and voila, you have a meal. And you can swap out any of those things. So, okay, instead of chicken, what about sausages? What about ground beef? Stuff like that. You can basically make a meal out of any of those things. So if you first think of a protein, then you think of a carb to go with the protein, and then fiber and fat as well. So that can be a nice balanced meal, healthy meal for you and your family, but still not like as complex as like, okay, I got to think of like a theme. I got to think of like this really complex thing. No, let's break it down to basics. Start from the bottom: protein, carb, fiber, fat. That's my advice if you are strapped for a quick meal. Okay. Also, you could consider keeping an inventory of the ingredients that you always have. Marcella talked about this also recently. I don't remember what episode it was in, if it was in the bonus episode or if it was in last week's. But if you have an inventory of your ingredients, or ingredients that you repurchase often, that can, one, help take the guesswork out of meal planning. Two, if you always have the same ingredients in your house and you constantly keep it stocked and it's always in your grocery cart, or it's always in your Instacart pickup, you can count on those meals and those foods to be at the ready. So say I really wanted to bake something and I didn't want to go to the store. Well, if I already have butter, flour, egg, milk, that sort of thing, you can make so many things out of basic ingredients that are trusty ingredients that you know that you're going to use. Speaking of trusty recipes, I talked about this in the bonus episode, but I will briefly cover it right now. If you have a main area, so it can be like a binder, a hardcover thing that you have, or you can have a Pinterest board or a digital notepad where you have all of the recipes that you know very well, that you don't need a recipe book or directions or measurements, just your tried and true, your trusty recipes that you can count on, that you know how to do really well. If you have a list of that somewhere that you can refer to when you're meal planning or when you're struggling to figure out what to cook, this is the best way to do it. This is the best way to stay organized, is to have it out of your brain and onto paper or your phone or somewhere where you can refer back to it. One thing that also helps me, because I do think that a lot of smooth cooking experiences start with being organized and having a clean area to cook, is to lay out all of the ingredients that you need before beginning a recipe or a meal. This can help with lessening your overwhelm, and it can also save cooking time. So say, for example, I can give you an overwhelming example. So say I decided to whip up a rotisserie chicken or a spatchcock chicken with lemon and garlic, and I just had this vision for this chicken that I wanted to make. And so say I spatchcock my chicken, which, if you have no idea what that means, you basically cut the spine out of the chicken and you break the breastbone, I believe. Somebody's going to correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't spatchcocked a chicken in a long time because it kind of gives me the ick. But if you're doing that and your hands are just deep in raw chicken, but then you forgot to get the lemon, get the garlic out, or you were like, okay, I'm going to start this process, but I don't have any of the seasonings. I don't have the butter to put under the skin of the chicken. I haven't started preheating the oven. If you start things out of order and then you just hope I'll just grab things as they go, it's going to add to the overwhelm. So I don't know about you, when my hands are deep in raw meat, that is not the time to be thinking about, okay, what do I need next? If I have everything at the ready with spoons and everything I need, and I have my oven preheating and everything's laid out for me, that way when I start my meal, I am less overwhelmed, I'm more organized, I'm more clear-headed, and that can make a cooking experience so much smoother. Also, practicing time management and multitasking. This is something that comes with time and practice, obviously. It may be difficult at first, but the more you do it, it'll become more natural. So I would say maybe consider, if you're really struggling with time management in the kitchen or multitasking at all, say you really need to do one thing at a time. Like, girl, I can't be cooking rice and then also be cooking my orange chicken and also be chopping my broccoli all at the same time. How do you girls do it? How do you guys do that? How do the chefs do that? Well, it takes practice at first. You have to learn how long it takes for the rice to cook in your Instant Pot or on the stove. You have to learn how long it takes for chicken to brown in the oven or to brown on the stove. So once you learn and pay close attention to how long each task for an entire meal takes, then you can better figure out, okay, so once I get my rice started, I really don't need to be standing there and watching it intently. I can actually step away and start chopping my broccoli. And I can actually, while I'm chopping my broccoli, I can throw my chicken in the oven or on the stove and with my oil and have a nice heated pan ready for me. And I don't need to be babying my chicken. I only need to move it around every couple minutes. So while my rice is cooking and while my chicken is browning, and again, I only need to come over every couple minutes to, stir it and figure out if it's cooking well, if I need to chop it a little bit smaller, that sort of thing, then I can be over here in my broccoli station chopping broccoli one at a time or figuring out the best way to do it. So that's kind of an example of a way that you could practice time management, is to figure out and pay attention to how long each part of a meal takes. And once you figure out how long it takes, then you can start making it more streamlined and a little bit more efficient when you're cooking. That way it lessens cooking time, lessens overwhelm, and can also lessen the workload of like the dread that comes with, I have to cook a meal right now and it's going to take me an hour. Well, it actually could only take 20 minutes of actual cooking time. But when we are so overwhelmed and we're disorganized, that's when the overwhelm sets in. And that's when we start increasing the time that it takes to cook, and you're getting hot in the kitchen and you're getting flustered. And that's when it becomes a very unpleasant experience. Okay, so the secret, in my opinion, the other secret I have to a smooth cooking experience is a clean surface and clean equipment. So learn to clean as you go. And I know people say that all the time and you're like, girl, how? Okay, so now I gotta be, so going back to our chicken, rice, and broccoli. Okay, so now not only do I need to be waiting for my rice, browning my chicken, and cutting my broccoli into florets. Now I have to be cleaning as I go. And it's like, I know. So again, for some of us, this is very natural. And for others, it's like, how do you do this? I would say take the small, tiny moments, the seconds in between your cooking to take the time to tidy up and clean. Now, that doesn't mean you completely step away from the kitchen and what you're doing to like do a full wipe down of the surface to deep clean and shine your sink. No, I'm talking about like cleaning up, like, okay, so say for example, you just took the raw chicken and you put it in your pan and now you have the chicken packaging and it's just sitting on your counter. And so if you have a moment in between your broccoli, your rice, your chicken to go and throw that away, that's one last thing that you have to do after you're done cooking. And it's also like visual clutter can really impact our stress levels in our brains to think like, like it's getting so hectic in here. So if you find little pockets, and I'm saying literal seconds, I'm not saying like, oh, in between this and that, you're going to be doing a 10-minute tidy up. No, like the actual seconds in between the tasks of cooking a meal. Take the time to just have a paper towel out and wipe that surface that has the chicken juice on it or whatever, or to throw the dishes that you were using out of the counter and into the sink. So that sort of thing can really, really help lessen the overwhelm and streamline the cooking process. Another secret that I have is dish gloves. And this is a weapon that I use in my kitchen. Okay, so I did not used to be a dish glove girly. I started becoming a dish glove girly when I started becoming a full-time homemaker. And part of it is because my husband was doing the majority of the dishes when I was working, because again, I was still the primary cook, and that was how we had things split. So I would cook all of our meals and he would do all of the dishes. So when I became a stay-at-home wife, I started taking on more of the dishes. He does still help with dinner cleanup most nights, which is a huge blessing, especially since dinner is like our climax of meals for the day. Like it's usually my big meal where I'm like doing a lot of things from scratch. So usually after that, I'm tired and I want to relax, and Ryan's very sweet and he helps me with the dishes. But other than that, I do all of the other dishes during the day if I'm feeling well. And so it's really funny because I used to think like the girls that wore dish gloves, I'm like, come on, like stop being a pansy, like get your hands wet, it's going to be fine. But then once I started getting into cooking more from scratch, and especially doing like sourdough, I needed to wash my hands all the time, and my hands were starting to get eczema flare-ups because I have eczema flare-ups anyway if in dry weather. But this was really making things worse for me. So then I was like, okay, I need to start wearing dish gloves. So I got some dish gloves when I started doing a lot more dishes, a lot more cooking, a lot more cleaning, and it has been life-changing. So if you are not already using dish gloves, I'm telling you, it makes me do the dishes so much faster. It makes me clean up so much faster. I'm not being as careful because I don't know about you guys, but touching like food on dirty dishes like makes me want to vomit. I feel like I have so many sensory issues. Like so many, and one of them is like soggy food on a dirty dish is like absolutely not. So wearing the dish gloves completely takes that out of my mind, and I could just load the dishwasher up really quick, hand wash things that need to be hand washed, and I do it quickly and efficiently, and I'm not worried about my hands getting dried up or the water being too hot or my touching nasty things. So that is something, if you're not already doing, I highly recommend you do. Another thing regarding the same area of dishes is loading the dishwasher after every meal. Because again, if we have a clean kitchen, and I'm not saying like perfect, pristine throughout the day, because I always say a dirty kitchen is a working kitchen. If your kitchen is working and you are working in it, it is going to get dirty. It's going to have dirty dishes. It's going to be cluttered. Like, our home is not a museum. It is meant to be lived in. So if our kitchen is dirty because we're working in it and we're baking, we're cooking, we're doing things in it, we're living life in it, that's one thing. But if it gets so overwhelming to where it is no longer inviting you to come back into the kitchen and you end up avoiding it, then that means we need to kind of like consider some things. So again, this was happening to me where I was getting overwhelmed because our old strategy, when I wasn't cooking as much from scratch, I was relying a little bit more on convenience meals when I was working, is we only really needed to load the dishwasher at the end of the night. But now we accumulate a lot more dishes during the day. So I load the dishwasher after each meal, and it just takes a few minutes if I do it and I'm like diligent about it. I just throw on my dish gloves, put in my book or my podcast in my ear, and I get it done. And then I have a clean kitchen, clean-ish kitchen for me to come back in and feel invited to come back in and cook again. And I'm not stressed about, oh, I can't go in there because there's so many dirty dishes or there's so much clutter in my kitchen. I just do a quick little wipe down of the counters. I don't even think about it. It's just like so like a natural thing now that I've started doing it, is like, okay, after breakfast, after coffee, and I'm done with my coffee, I go straight into the kitchen, unload the dishwasher from the night before, load it up with breakfast dishes, and now I'm ready to come back for lunchtime shift and then back again for dinner time shift. So that is something that has really helped invite me to come back into the kitchen to be less overwhelmed. Another thing is considering wearing an apron. So I'm not going to be dogmatic about this because I don't want to be accused of being a crazy trad wife, but I'm not kidding you. When I wear an apron, I feel like I'm Superwoman. I am so ready to get dirty and get ready to go and get things done in the kitchen, especially. I don't wear an apron outside of the kitchen. I know some people wear apron like the entire day of homemaking, but I primarily only wear it when I'm in the kitchen. It helps me so much to be a little bit more like free in the kitchen and not worry as much about getting my clothes wet or dirty or full of food or bacon grease or whatever is happening in there. It is so life-changing. And also it kind of feels like a work uniform. So I put on my house shoes when I go downstairs, put on my little slides, my little house shoes, put on my apron, and I don't know, just like something happens in my brain that triggers okay, you're in work mode, you're ready to go, you're ready to take on the day, you're ready to serve your family, make incredible food, like you can do this. And it really does motivate me. It feels like my uniform. So I got my dish gloves, got my apron on, got my house shoes on, and I'm ready to go. Also, another tip is to keep your frequently used appliances on your counter. Who cares how it looks? I know we've gone through so many eras of minimalism and having to have pristine counters that are not full of appliances. I am so against that. I mentioned this in my Patreon episode called Kitchen Rhythms. I think it's one of the last points I made, where I talk about the trap of minimalism to make you think that you have to have like a constant, like perfect, pristine house that's not lived in. And I have been wrapped up in that trap in various senses, but one that always comes back to me and I always have to put it out of my mind is my kitchen counters, because yes, they're cluttered. Every inch of counter space in my kitchen has something on it, and that might make people cringe. But honestly, like if I didn't have that, I would not be inclined to use any of the appliances or cook the meals that I want to cook. So, for example, I have my KitchenAid stand mixer on my countertop, and if I didn't have it out, it is very heavy. It's a very heavy appliance. It's very bulky. It would be a pain to figure out how to store it and then bring it out every time I wanted to use it. Since it's on my counter 24/7, it has a permanent place on my counter. When I'm ready to bake or use it for any reason, it is so easy for me to make that decision other than getting a convenience meal or buying the whipped cream instead of whipping it up myself, that sort of thing. Because it's already on my counter, I don't have to pull it out, it's already there waiting for me, and it's clean and it's waiting for me to be used again. So something to consider. Also, speaking of appliances, don't underestimate the power of an Instant Pot or a crock pot. I know that there's been especially like maybe more in like the trad or homemaking community, a pushback against like using so many appliances or using appliances to cook to be like shortcuts. And I'm here to tell you, please use the shortcuts. Please use your crock pot. Please use your Instant Pot. It is real cooking. It counts. That is cooking. You are cooking. If you are making a meal for your family that is nutritious and you prep it in the beginning of the day and you throw it in the crock pot and you let the crock pot do all the work, or the Instant Pot, like I utilize mine to death. I use both my crock pot and my Instant Pot every single week, several times a week. And it really helps to encourage me to be cooking more if I know that I can have, I call them my servants. My servants that are in my house are my appliances. These are the things that help me to be able to do more things in the kitchen or more things in the home. So I don't want to be sitting there babying chicken on the stove all the time. I want to throw it in the Instant Pot, know it's going to get cooked, know it's going to get taken care of. So it can kind of help you to think about shortcuts in the kitchen that can help you be encouraged to cook more, because that's the point, right? Okay, I'm moving on from organization, clean surface, clean equipment, that sort of thing. Let's move on to a couple other tips. So I would recommend, especially if you're considering meal planning, is to limit your recipe experimenting to once a week or even every other week. So my tried and true recipes I talked about earlier that I have in a binder, those are the recipes that I know for a fact that my family enjoys, and I can make them kind of more on a repetitive basis without all of us being like disgusted by it. So if I want to try something new, it's very rare. It's very rare that I venture out. Usually if I venture out, it's like a baking venture, something with sourdough, because that's like what I'm doing right now. But I very, very rarely am like, ooh, I really want to try this new recipe. I mastered the ones that I feel comfortable with, that my family enjoys. Get a handful of recipes under your belt, practice them, master them, know them, figure out time management with that, figure out how you can streamline it, figure out the shortcuts. That way you can rely on those meals for your weekly meal plan. Another thing that can be really helpful, and especially for these sort of recipes that are more repetitive meals, is learning how to eyeball measurements. This can really cut down on dishes and time in the kitchen. Eyeballing is generally safe unless a recipe specifies a very strict measurement. So I know that there are people that are very, very loose with their sourdough loaf measurements. I'm a little bit more strict with it because I want the same result of my loaf every single time. But with everything else, I'm usually very loosey-goosey with measurements. Memorize what a cup of water or a cup of flour or a cup of what's something else that we use a lot? Sugar. Memorize what that looks like. Or a tablespoon. These common measurements, if we learn and watch and observe what it looks like, at an estimation of what it looks like, it can, again, cut down on time, cut down on dishes, and it can also just make you feel more confident as a cook and as a baker. Okay, I got some random ones for you guys now. These are not really like in any category. Those are just things that I was brain dumping when I was making this episode. So, when in doubt of how to season your meal, especially any type of meat or veggie, use what I call the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four are salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder. So these four are always like at the front of my seasonings. I'm constantly using them. Another one that I use a lot, especially for like meat and potatoes, is paprika. That's kind of like my fifth, like, honorable mention because we like a little spice. But salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder are truly like, you cannot go wrong with them. So if you are experimenting with cooking and you want to kind of develop your own meal or recipe and you don't really know what to start, or if you are using a recipe that calls for a ton of herbs and a ton of seasonings and you don't really have them at hand, using salt, pepper, garlic, and onion is just a guarantee that the food's going to taste good. It may not taste exactly like the flavor palette that the person was going for in the recipe, but it will taste good, and a seasoned food is always good. Okay, next tip is to learn your oven. So these are for the people that have burned things in their oven. It may not be your fault. So there's so many people that I always hear that are like, oh, I'm just a terrible cook. I burn everything. And I hear people go, how? How are you burning things constantly? So, well, if you're constantly burning things on the stove, I don't really know how to help you. I don't have any tips for you. Maybe lower your lower your heat a little bit and just be more patient with your meal, and maybe don't leave and keep an eye on it. But as far as people that burn things in ovens, and I'm one of those people that have burned things in ovens, especially when we lived in an apartment that used electric oven, it may not be your fault, because ovens, just like any other appliance, are not perfect. They can, especially if they're old, every oven functions differently, and it could be either malfunctioning, it could be old, there could be an issue, or it's just an oven that it's a new oven to you and you're used to another oven, and then all of a sudden you start burning your food and you're like, what the heck is going on? So this is what I would do if you're burning your food, or if you're struggling and you're just like, man, this is overcooking every time. Or something that was happening to me recently when I moved into this house is that my cookies were taking literally forever to bake. And I was so overwhelmed and was like, what am I going to do? I feel like every time I'm like adding 10 minutes to my cookies. I don't understand. So learn to adapt to the oven that you have. Every oven is different, like I said, or it could just be simply like it's old, malfunctioning. It might need to get serviced. You may need to consider saving for a new oven. But in the meantime, changing the time and temperature and watching it very carefully until you figure out the sweet spot for whatever you make consistently that ends up burning can really help troubleshoot that situation. So I figured out the perfect time and the perfect temperature to get my cookies, the perfect texture. It's not undercooked and it's not burned. But if it goes literally a minute over, it ends up burning. And I just don't know why. I'm telling you, it's my oven. I'm always complaining about my oven to my husband. And I'm like, I swear there's something wrong with that oven. This is not normal. So you just learn to adapt, change the time, change the temperature, figure out your oven, and that might be the solution. It might not be you. It might not be that you're a bad cook or that you're just having really bad luck. It just genuinely could be your oven is struggling and you need to adapt and figure out the exact times and temperatures that it works well for your food. Got 3 more tips for you guys. Next one is washing your rice. I did not wash my rice for a very long time, and my sister would always judge me, and she would be like, what's wrong with you? That's disgusting. And also your texture of rice is probably really bad. Well, she was right. My rice was sticking to the bottom of my Instant Pot, and I didn't understand why mine was and hers wasn't. And then she was like, girl, it's because you're not washing it. So I have since learned my lesson. And not only am I washing my rice, so this is how I wash my rice. If you don't know how to wash rice, let's get to washing rice 101. I put mine in a fine mesh strainer, like a cup. So say I want a cup or 2 cups of rice. I put the 2 cups or 1 cup into a fine mesh strainer, and I just like rinse with my tap water or my filtered water all over, and I use my hands and I just wash it. I literally just like wash the rice, and then I put the rice into a bowl. Or if I'm ready to cook it right then I can cook it. But what I've been doing for the last year and a half or so is soaking my rice to reduce the phytic acid in the rice. It actually really helps with balancing your blood sugar, especially if you use basmati rice. It's really good for your blood sugar. So I put my rice in a bowl after washing it, or sometimes I mix it up. Sometimes I soak my rice and then wash it. Sometimes I wash it and then I soak it. But you probably should wash it first and then soak it. That's what my sister does, and I trust her. Again, she's a certified Latina. So I put my rice into the bowl and then I fill it up with water to cover it. And then I put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. The acid helps break down the phytic acid. And I let it soak. I cover it with like a towel or something, and I let it soak for at least 8 hours. So if I'm cooking rice in the evening, I soak it in the morning. And then when I'm done soaking it, I rinse it out, and then I'm ready to cook it. And it tastes great. The texture is so fluffy, so good. None of it sticks to the pot at all. And it's delicious. And then I've also been recently If you want to make your rice more like nutrient dense, I've been putting like 2 tablespoons of grass-fed butter on my rice before cooking it, and also instead of using water, using bone broth. So if you want, this is something that I was doing when I just had my tongue tie surgery done and I couldn't eat solid foods, I could only eat soft foods, and that was literally sustaining me, the bone broth rice. Okay, speaking of butter, I don't know, maybe we need to take a poll. I'm going to take a poll in the Facebook group this week. How many of you were butter on the counter people or butter in the fridge people? And I'm talking about like real cow's butter, not margarine or vegan butter or anything like that. I wouldn't do that with margarine or vegan butter, but recently, I'd say maybe in the last 2 years or so, I've transitioned from being a butter in the fridge girl to a butter on the counter. And most of it is because I wasn't having butter at all for many, many years because I was more plant-based. But once I started eating animal products again, I started experimenting with putting butter on the counter, and I was very scared at first, but then I realized we eat butter pretty often. It's not going to be on the counter longer than not even 5 days usually. That's probably the longest it's ever been on the counter, but it is so soft, so spreadable, ready. It's a ready to go fat that's ready to be cooking with, especially with eggs. So bomb to have nice softened butter with your eggs or on your toast. But I know that you guys are out there, those of you that did butter in the fridge. My mom raised us to be butter in the fridge people, and it wasn't until very recently that we've all turned into butter in the counter. And my grandma, I guess, has always been a butter on the counter person, or maybe she wasn't. There was a huge controversy in my family recently about who taught us. Where did we get this butter in the fridge habit? So yeah, now we've all transitioned to being butter on the counter people, and I never want to go back. And I don't know why that's a tip, but it's just good. So maybe do it. Another thing is, if you want another fat, especially if you buy high quality bacon, grass-fed bacon with like no fillers and stuff like that, filter your bacon fat and use it to make fries or to season your cast iron. I roast potatoes and fries usually. That's usually my main thing to use bacon fat with, because we don't have bacon all the time. It's like maybe once a month that I get a big thing of bacon, and I save my fat, and this is how I filter it. I put a paper towel unbleached, preferably. You don't want your fat going through a bleached paper towel. But I put it on a mason jar, and then I put just the ring of the top of a mason jar. So not like the actual lid, but the ring that goes on top of it. I put the ring on top of a paper towel and kind of make a little well. And then I put the bacon fat on top of the paper towel, and it drips down through the paper towel into the mason jar, and it's an easy way to filter your bacon fat. And then it filters it out, and it's usually very clean. There's never any like impurities in it. And then I save it in the fridge. It solidifies, and then when I'm ready to use it to either season my cast iron skillets or to make fries or whatever, I take it out. And I know that probably if I heard myself say these very words a couple years ago, I would have been so shocked. But Marcella and I need to do an episode soon about the radical food changes that we have made in our families. So I am pro bacon fat, pro lard, pro tallow, pro animal fat. I have not always been, and we're going to talk about that in length hopefully soon. But filtering my bacon fat is a cheap way to get high quality animal fats, because getting high quality fat at a store is very expensive. When I buy tallow at Sprouts, it's so insanely expensive. So if I can use and render my own animal fat from cooking, it helps me save a few bucks. Last tip, and I don't know if this is even a tip or me just like encouraging you, that we have what we call struggle meals. And Marcella and I and our husbands, we lovingly call it struggle meals, because it's the meal that happens when you didn't meal plan or you're waiting for payday. So if you're waiting for payday to get groceries, struggle meal. Maybe another example that might be applicable to some of you. Maybe it's the Sabbath day and you didn't plan ahead and you don't want to go to the store. Struggle meal. Or maybe you just had a really hard day and you forgot to plan a meal. Struggle meal. What's a struggle meal? Many of you probably already know what a struggle meal is. Maybe you are also on the struggle meal train. This happens to us usually when we're creeping to the edge of like waiting for the next week for our budget to kick in for groceries. So this is usually when it happens for us. And I think it's usually what a lot of our friends and family end up having to do when we lovingly call it a struggle meal. We're struggling until the next paycheck, or struggling until we are ready to get groceries again. So these are my perfect struggle meal examples that I could think of. Snack plates. When we don't have a meal plan, snack plates. And a lot of people that were on TikTok remember the girl dinner trend. Girl dinner is real. And it's not just for girls. You give it to your kids, give it to your husband. Snack plates. You just put snacks, everything that you have on your plate. I put fruit. I put like a beef stick or piece of cheese, cracker, a piece. My struggle meal one day was literally a piece of bread with butter, or 2 pieces of sourdough bread that I had left over with a generous amount of butter lathered on, and then a piece of deli meat. And that was a struggle meal, or girl dinner, or whatever you want to call it. Another idea for a struggle meal, and this is like something that I do very frequently too, is throw your odds and ends together for a soup or for fried rice. Oh man, I love a good fried rice. Sometimes I like plan to be like, okay, what veggies do I have that are just like on their last day of living? Chop that up, put like 1 or 2 eggs. You probably got an egg in your fridge. Crack an egg in your skillet. Get your couple day old rice. Whip it up. Some soy sauce or coconut aminos. That is a bomb meal. And it's usually like, you can put anything in fried rice. I could literally make fried rice like right now, just of random things that I have in the fridge. Frozen vegetables, the half of an onion at the bottom of your fridge that you don't know what to do with, that you don't have a plan for, that's going to shrivel away. Chop it up. Fry it up with some fried rice, girl. Man, that's good stuff. Also a soup. A soup is always good. And you could just throw whatever protein you have, whatever you could do. You don't even have to do broth. You can just put some seasoning in some filtered water. Get protein in there. Throw whatever veggies you have in there. Man, that's not a struggle meal. That sounds bomb. I just like, sometimes you just need something very plain, very simple. Anyway, but snack plates are usually my go-to struggle meal. And sometimes we send pictures. My sister and I send pictures to each other. Even our husbands send pictures too of like what our struggle meal was. And sometimes I'm like, guys, that looks great actually. Sometimes when you're scrounging around in your house and you become creative, that really can actually make you such a more better cook when you start to be like, okay, well, I have no choice now. Like, we don't have money till tomorrow or in a few days. We're not going to go out. We only have a few groceries left. What can I put together? And sometimes something magical happens. I remember very early on in our marriage, we had a day like this where we were just like, we don't have money to go out. We ran out of food, paydays in a few days. What am I going to do? I think on top of that, it was the Sabbath day and my husband and I don't spend money on that day. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And I figured out like a potato. I found a potato, some like chicken nuggets, frozen chicken nuggets that were just like maybe like frostbitten in the back of our freezer, and we had a bag of frozen corn, and I made like KFC bowls out of them. And so I made a little mashed potato. I somehow revived those chicken nuggets back to health somehow, and then I threw some corn in there. I think I put a little shredded cheese on top. Man, it was actually good. It was really good. And I was like, wow, I would have never put this together unless we had no choice but to figure out what to make here. So sometimes You just gotta have a struggle day where you're like, I don't have a meal planned, but we have people to feed. What are we gonna do? You get creative in the kitchen, figure it out. That's a great way to become more comfortable as a cook and be more comfortable in the kitchen with your skills. So I hope today's episode was not a complete train wreck for you guys. I hope it was encouraging. I hope it was fun. Let me know. What are your tips? What are your cooking tips? I want to level up my skills in the kitchen. I feel like right now I feel super confident and comfortable in the kitchen, but now I'm like, wow, 10 years from now, like I'm stoked. Like I hope I'm like a 5-star chef in 10 years because I just feel like the more time you spend in there and the more comfortable you get, the more recipes you get under your belt, like you just like, it's like so fun. Like it just really does become fun. And I used to not like cooking at all, especially cooking from scratch. I relied heavily on convenience meals, like was not fun at all. But now like I'm really enjoying it and I feel very fulfilled in the kitchen. Like if somebody tells me to go in the kitchen, I'm like, let's go. I'll go in the kitchen. What do you want me to make you? I'll figure it out. I'll cook for you. But again, it takes time. It takes practice. It takes a willingness to mess up. And man, I have messed up a lot in the kitchen, a lot. There have been some meals that were not bangers. They were nasty and we choked them down and we figured it out. And I was like, well, I'm never making that again, or I need to figure out what went wrong. So you are not alone. If you are struggling in the kitchen and you need help getting back to basics, like there is still hope for you. You can be like, I swear, like I feel like a success story of somebody that like struggled so much in the beginning and to get my bearings, and now feeling very comfortable, very confident enough to talk to you guys in this podcast about it. Because if I didn't, then I wouldn't make this episode, because it would be so weird to be like, hey guys, I also am burning food every day. But yeah, I was burning my cookies a lot, but now they're fine. So all right, guys. Well, I'm going to stop rambling on because I feel like a little crazy talking to a camera and nobody else for probably an hour now, but I'm going to get going. I love you all so dearly. I can't wait for next week's episode with my mom. Look forward to listening to that. We have a great episode planned for you guys, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. Bye.